Hello. I guess you can hear me, right? So I'm Dr. Matt. My students call me Dr. Crime is my nickname. My hip-hop name is Dr. Crime Raps, if you want to Google that. So I'm going to give you an inspirational talk. When we think of crime, we think bad, evil, scary. And that's true. That's definitely a reality of crime, as I well know. Inspirational means to move you, to guide you, to inspire you. And that's what I hope to do, to give you a different way of thinking about crime today. So first of all, I'm a criminologist. That's my title. And I study crime. I explain why it happens. I have my own theories. I talk about how to prevent it. I have a crime prevention class, crime prevention book. I do crime prevention consulting for free to try to help solve crime. But when we think of crime, we think of bad things. We think of bad, scary, evil things. And in fact, it can be. This is just a snapshot of some of the latest data we have in terms of how much crime there is in our country. So obviously, 16,000 murders is too many. It's 16,000 too many. 5 million violent crimes, 10 million property crimes, and about $14 billion in direct losses. This is not indirect costs like productivity or lost wages or things like that. This is actual losses from the property crimes. So obviously, it's a pretty big deal. However, to give you some context, we're a country in this year of about 320 million people. So that means the vast majority of us, thankfully, are not at risk for serious violent crime victimization. In fact, if you ask a sociologist or a criminologist, criminal victimization is largely isolated to certain groups of people in this country. And it's impoverished people, people of color, people living in large cities and things like that. People like me, pretty safe from it. Also, another piece of context, this is not the most damaging thing to you. This is not the thing that's most likely to kill you, hurt you, or take your property. You'll see that today. Now, when I was in grad school, my major professor, just when I was starting my PhD program, said, "Why do you want to study criminology? It's the worm's eye view of the world." And I was like, "Wait, you're a criminologist. You did it. Why shouldn't I?" It is. We deal with people suffering. That's true. And it is sometimes overwhelming when you deal with terrorism and drug deaths and murder and rape and things like that. When you have students coming to you who've been assaulted and things like that. It's a lot of suffering. But there's another view of crime, too. That's the inspirational view that I want to share with you tonight. So, for example, this is great news. Look at all these jobs we get because of crime. Millions and millions and millions of jobs. And these people go to work, and they make money, and they pay taxes, and they raise their families, and they contribute to the GDP. That's all good. And then we have people like me, professor. I'm getting old. Professors. I make a pretty good living doing this, actually. Teaching, writing, speaking about crime. And sometimes it's a little perverted, actually. I've actually written and spoken about that. I'll go to a city like Chicago, right to the middle of the city in the Loop, and I'll stay in a hotel for $300 a night to present research about crime when people are suffering from it. It's really kind of perverse. But that's the American Society of Criminology or the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences, these major organizations that deal with it. Bad, evil, scary. When we think of crime, this is one of the major misconceptions we have. We think things like robbery, assault, carjacking. Those are realities. That's real. This is very unlikely to happen to you. Thankfully, most of us are not victims of this. But this is what we fear. And the reason we fear this and the reason we think of this when we think of crime is because most of our conceptions of crime come from the mass media. There's very clear research on this. Again, thankfully, most of us are not crime victims. We're not running around committing serious crimes. We're not involved in the criminal justice system. We're not being arrested. We're not being convicted. We're not serving on juries. I just served on a jury. I can't believe it. A criminologist on a jury. Look it up. It's unheard of. There's no way I should have done it. But I was on a jury for a kidnapping robbery case, and I was the jury foreperson. It shook me up, really. But it's unlikely to happen to us. So because we don't know about it, we end up getting our information about the media, about crime from the media. So what do the media show us? There's currently at least 35 television shows right now about murder on television. So we think murder happens all the time, and it's likely to happen to you, even though, as you saw, that's not the case. So for example, here's something more dangerous than street crime. Did you hear about this in 2008? Were you alert then, alive and alert, paying attention to the news? This financial crisis, which was caused by fraud in big banks and Wall Street, cost us between $12 and $22 trillion. $12 and $22 trillion. That's kind of a breakdown of how much it cost each of us per household on average. So street crime, about $14 billion. Are you good at math? Which one's bigger? I always ask my students, is 14 billion bigger or 12 to 22 trillion? How much bigger is it? 600 to 1,200 years worth of street crime in 1 year. Here's another example. Did you hear about this case? A major American automobile company. The first, I don't know how to use the pointer, but that's okay. The first picture is an ignition switch. This is how long it should be, and that's how long it was. And that's the first victim who died. More than 100 people died as a result of this. She died in 2005 in the state of Maryland. So you're driving along, your car's running, you're going 70, 80 miles down the interstate, and your ignition turns off while you're driving because the ignition switch is too short. So you bump your key or something, you have too many keys on your keychain, car turns off. What happens to your car? It doesn't stop, right? Your car keeps going, keeps moving. You can't steer it, you can't stop it. The brakes don't work, the steering doesn't work. You know, thousands of pounds of movement, glass, metal, going to work. You're going to hit something. When you hit something because you can't steer or brake, your airbags don't deploy and your seatbelts don't work. It's literally a death machine. This company knew about this for at least 8 years and didn't recall it. More than 100 people died. The cost to fix each car was 57 cents. Not a crime. So neither one of those cases led to anyone going to prison. No one was arrested. No one was convicted. No one went to prison. And yet, we lead the nation in we lead the world, in incarceration. We're number one. If there was an imprisonment Olympics, we got the gold medal. Usain Bolt was mentioned. We're Usain Bolt. You know, when he's running and he's going across the finish line, he's like laughing, he's like smiling because people are so far behind him. That's how we are with prison. How can it be that we lead the world in incarceration, and yet the people who do those kinds of things are not in prison? The reason is because crime is invented. Crime is not a real, tangible thing that exists in the natural world. It's a human invention. We envision it, we conjure it up in our own imagination. So that means that anything can be a crime, and nothing's automatically a crime. People decide that. Now, to be clear, there is property taking in nature. So this little squirrel here is a thief. He's taking nuts from another squirrel. And that lion right there is a killer. But the squirrel is it's not theft. The lion is not a murderer. They don't call the zebra police, right? It's just nature. So only among humans is property taking a crime, and only among humans is killing a crime. But even then, only under certain circumstances, right? There's ways to take your property even against your will, and there's ways to kill you that are perfectly legal because crime's invented. So that means since crime's invented, quite literally anything can be a crime. The only way that the only thing that has to happen for something to be a crime is that a legislature or Congress passes a law. That's how it happens. That's how it's invented. You want some examples? It's illegal to jump from a plane unless it's a true emergency. It's a crime to walk down the sidewalk with your shoelaces untied. It's a crime to punch a bull in the nose or pretend your parents are rich. Eat peanuts while in church, dance in public places, throw shoes at a wedding, carry a bear down the highway unless it's caged, milk someone else's cow, fish with explosives. Who does that? Slurp soup, shoot open a can of soup, throw pickle juice on a trolley, use reptiles as part of a religious service, or remarry the same man 3 times in Kentucky. So these are things that are actually illegal. So these are things that were either bad, evil, or scary enough, problematic enough that legislatures thought, well, this needs to be a crime. I don't know who those people were getting married to the same person, maybe with a reptile, I don't know. In North Carolina, it's a crime to spotlight a deer. You know what that means if you're hunting? You put a spotlight on it, it stands still, right? Because that's not fair. It's not fair. I'm like, well, if you're trying to shoot it, isn't it good if it's standing still? You're not gonna miss, right? So it's fair to hunt. It's fair to wear camouflage, to be up in a deer stand. It's fair to have a high-powered rifle with a scope. That's fair. It's fair to put food down to attract them. It's fair to spray a scent where it actually thinks he's coming to mate. You can do that legally. He's like, a doe, a deer, a female deer. Bam! There's even like, you can use a deer call. I don't actually know what it sounds like, but it's like, deer, or something, I don't know. and they come in, right? But it's illegal to spotlight them? Because it's unfair? You know what would be fair? Hand-to-hand combat. You know, you go in the woods with some boxing gloves. This is a real video. You've probably seen it. The deer won. But you know, you with your boxing gloves versus the antlers, that would be fair, right? It's illegal in North Carolina to cuss in front of a dead body. It's illegal in North Carolina for a male to talk to a female at an all-female campus. I'm still trying to figure out, how does a male professor answer a question in a class when a female asks a question? Like, so really, have I convinced you that anything can be a crime? Anything. Okay, keep that in mind. Number two, since crime is invented, that means nothing's automatically a crime. No matter how bad, no matter how evil, no matter how wrong it is, it's not automatically a crime. It's only a crime when a law is passed. So laws weren't passed to stop that defective product case with the ignition switch. Laws weren't passed to stop that widespread fraud in big banks and on Wall Street, to stop that collapse, the financial collapse. That's why there are not people in prison for those non-crimes. So I want you to think of something that you think is bad, evil, deviant, wrong, immoral, but legal. Something that in your opinion should be a crime. Maybe it's abortion. Maybe it's smoking around a child, like your own baby, blowing smoke in your own baby's face. Maybe you think the death penalty should be a crime. I'm just throwing things out there. Why are they not crimes if they're wrong? Because there's no law. It's just that simple. Crime's an invention. So here's an example of something legal that you could certainly argue should be a crime. This is a product that we sell in the United States. This is what it does. Now again, you have to be good at math. See the losses? Is that bigger or smaller than street crime? A lot bigger, right? Does anyone know what this product is? It's not meth. It's not heroin. It's not prescription drugs. It's not opioid overdoses. It's tobacco. Now, should it be a crime? That's debatable, right? Some people think it should. Some people think it shouldn't. You could obviously make the case that it could be, or it should be, but could it be? Yeah, because anything can be a crime. Now, since we think crime is inherently bad, evil, wrong, immoral, this is how we approach it. Because logically, when something's bad, evil, scary, you can fight a war on that thing to eradicate it. So we've had a war on crime since at least the 1930s. We've had a war on drugs since at least the 1930s. We've had a war on terrorism since at least the 1980s, if not sooner. Because we have to do it when you're fighting something evil, when the enemy's bad. It actually doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to have a war on crime, drugs, and terrorism. We don't have to lead the world in incarceration. We don't have to be the only Western industrialized democracy in the world that practices capital punishment. We don't have to be that way. It's a choice. And it's based on what we make illegal and what we don't. That's the inspiration, you see? Seeing it in a different way, empowering yourself. So consider marijuana. Marijuana in the 1930s was called the assassin of youth, the killer weed. You ever see the movie Reefer Madness? When the guy gets high and then he commits a murder. Have you seen someone high? They don't murder someone, they like go to sleep, right? After they get something to eat, right? The woman in the movie, she gets high and she goes like loses it, and then she goes and jumps out of a window of a high-story building, like a giant building, to her death. Do you know what people do? I feel like I should remake that movie where she gets high and then she goes like to the pantry and gets some Cheetos. That's the reality of it, right? It's not that marijuana is harmless. Anything you ingest that alters your brain and that you smoke is potentially harmful. The numbers are a little skewed there because of the change in computers from PowerPoint, but that number of marijuana deaths is 1 to 2, not 0. between 1 and 2 a year. That's the actual official government number from the US Centers for Disease Control. Between 1 and 2 people a year are officially killed by marijuana. 480,000 by tobacco. So anything can be a crime. Which one would you legislate? You're trying to save lives. The purpose of government is to protect you from harms. 41,000 of those people who die from tobacco are not smokers. Tobacco kills 1,300 people a day. It kills 1 out of 5 people that die every year, die from tobacco. You lose on average 10 years of your life on it. And it's not like a pleasant death. It's a long, agonizing, slow, horrible, expensive death on top of that. Meanwhile, you can't get high? This seems a little weird. So look, here's an example of what's happening in the United States. States are realizing this research on the difference between marijuana and other drugs, and they're going, yep, we're going to take a step back from that. Yep, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to just overnight have less crime, just like that. So states you see it starts on the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, California, Colorado, Alaska. Notice it's moved to Maine. That was in the last election, and it was 50 to 50. It was a nail biter. 50% wanted to legalize, 50% didn't, and it was like random computer error or whatever that decided they should legalize marijuana. It was really small. These are states that basically said, we're not going to have crime. Marijuana is not a crime anymore. So what's happened? They have less crime, by definition. Also, all that black market crime, like robbery, carjacking, theft, to get money to buy the drug, because it's more expensive when it's illegal. That doesn't happen as much. The black market crimes. They're bringing in tax revenue so they can build schools and roads and stuff like that. Colorado had so much money come in, they actually sent a check to everyone in the state. Here's 50 bucks. They've reduced racial disparities in incarceration. They have less, so police aren't arresting people for that. They're actually helping people learn how to smoke marijuana legally. Like, if you want to do it, here's where you can do it and where you can't. And I'm not saying people should smoke by any means. I'm just saying you can. It's not a crime anymore. So now they have all these extra resources to use to fight things like violent crime, which is what's important. So here's the inspiration. We decide which of those anything should be a crime and which shouldn't. And therefore, we can have as much crime or as little crime as we want. It's up to us. We don't have to have wars on things. Or if we do, we can be more selective about it. So as a criminologist, here's my suggestion. Let us focus on the things that are actually harmful to us, especially when those things are done by other people. Especially when those things are done by other people with culpability, which means moral and legal responsibility. If someone intentionally hurts you or takes your property against your will, if someone recklessly kills you or negligently harms you or knowingly does something that takes your property and kills you, that's culpability. Then let's hold those people accountable. And if we do, that means we can ignore the stuff that's not that harmful. That means we don't have to incarcerate people who aren't doing something that's that big of a deal. We can save money. We can provide more justice to crime victims. We can have a more fair society. We can reduce racial disparities in incarceration and policing that we have today that are shocking. And we can have a happier life. Isn't that inspirational? Are you with me? Then let's do it. Thank you.